Hi, everyone. Welcome. Good afternoon. Good morning. Welcome to Rail Champions 101. I'm Betsy Cantwell, president of GoRail, and I'm so glad you could be with us. As many of us know, August recess is one of the most important times for advocacy because members of Congress are back home meeting with constituents. And so we're using this time. We thought it would be a good opportunity to talk advocacy, sort of best practices, both at like a high level across advocacy and then specifically for what we're doing with Rail Champions. Um, we're really happy with Rail Champions. This program is really cool. Over the last year, we've gone from about 30,000 advocates to over 100,000, and so it's definitely a growing community, and we sense the enthusiasm. And what we would like to do is continue providing resources back to you all. Not only about best practices, but what's happening in our world, because we realize that you're not all, rail day-to-day rail experts. And so anytime we can provide clarification on policy issues, please let us know. We're here to help. On that note, today's session is a part of that effort, and I am so happy you could all join. I'm going to hand it over to Mary McKeller, our Director of Digital Communications, and she's going to walk you through Rail Champions 101.
Thanks, Betsy. Yeah, thank you all so much for joining. I really appreciate it. Before I sort of dive in, I'd love to hear from you all. So if you want to go ahead and open the chat and let me know like where you're joining from and why you're a Rail champion. Why are you here today? What brought you here? As Betsy said, my name is Mary McKeller. I'm Director of Digital Communications at GoRail. For those who are unfamiliar about what GoRail is, it's a national nonprofit that advocates for America's freight railroads. And Rail Champions is our grassroots program, a part of that organization. And that's what this session is about what Rail Champions is, why it exists, and how we actually use it. So let me go to the next slide here. Just some session goals about what we're going to cover today. Of course, why Rail Champions exists, what it is, why it's here. I'm going to go through a quick policy update about what wins we've had so far this year and what's next, what's coming down the pike for the rest of the year. I'm going to do a quick Action Center walkthrough. So I'm going to go on, do a share screen and show you live on what our Action Center looks like and the different resources that we have there. And then go through quickly some advocacy best practices and then ways that you can take action today. So, love to hear what comes to mind when you hear advocacy. While I hear that, while you guys are talking about that, I'm going to go into what the key message is. So Rail Champions, bottom line, it exists because people writing the rail policy in Washington aren't rail experts. They're not, and they don't often have the day-to-day experiences with rail that these Rail Champions do have. Like Alex, who's in the chat saying that he's worked in all of the railroads, and now works in advising. And then Katie in California, who donates to the High Speed Rail Alliance, which sounds really, really cool and awesome. These are the different things that the lawmakers in Washington want to hear. They want to hear why freight rail matters to you. And so that's what the whole premise of Rail Champions is. So how does rail show up in your day-to-day life, right? Maybe it's a crossing that you cross over every day to get to work. Maybe your grandfather worked in the railroad or maybe you just love trains. I'd love to hear how does rail show up in your day-to-day life? So Rail Champions, as you're doing that in the chat, I'll go through what Rail Champions is. It's a grassroots movement of Americans who believe that freight rail is essential. Currently, as Betsy said, we have over 100,000 Rail Champions across the country in more than 5,300 cities and 5,800 counties, which is really, really exciting. And it's still growing. We're getting new Rail Champions joining every day. And that really matters, because the bigger the Rail Champion's voice is, the more weight it will carry in Washington and the more we can affect what's going on in our legislation. Everyone in this call right now is a Rail Champion, and that's really exciting. At its core, Rail Champions is a direct line from local voices like yours to the policymakers writing rail legislation in Congress. So why do grassroots voices matter, right? As we know, rail supports jobs and local economic development, as well as relieving taxpayer burden for infrastructure upkeep and eases congestion. Um, and so as members of Congress pay close attention to the impact in their own districts, these are the kinds of stories that we need to tell, how rail supports jobs in your community. Um, Congress also relies on constituent input, right? They need to hear from the people that elected them, and their job is to do what their constituents say. And of course, a policy position will land very, very differently coming from a home district voter, a constituent, rather than from an industry group. And then, of course, most importantly, a story always beats a statistic. A lawmaker will remember what you told them about your community and your relation to rail, rather than a number that they hear from a briefing memo. That's the types of things that we want to highlight, or why grassroots voices matter when it comes to freight rail legislation. So let's see here. How does rail show up in your life? Alex says he's loved railroads since he was a young boy. That is as good a reason as any to be a rail champion, because you love seeing rail trains pass by when you're traveling the country. It's really exciting. It looks like we have a lot of local leaders here, which is a really awesome thing to see because your voices really matter to Congress as well. And so, Colorado, I see Kansas extending rail service. Super, super exciting. And these are the kind of stories that our Congress people want to hear, right? They want to hear why freight rail matters to you. And that's what makes advocacy work. And so now that we've sort of covered what the 101, we're going to go into some recent policy wins. And I realize that I'm sharing the wrong screen, so I'm going to stop sharing it. And get the right presentation. Sorry, y'all. Okay. Can you all see my screen now? Okay. So we're going to talk about CORCA. For those of you who are unaware, CORCA is the Combating Organized Retail Crime Act, or HR 2853. It was introduced back in April of 2025 by Representative David Joyce of Ohio, with bipartisan co-sponsors on both sides of the aisle, and a companion bill in the Senate from Senators Chuck Grassley and Catherine Cortez Masto. This bill targets organized theft rings that operate across state lines and sometimes internationally to steal cargo across the supply chain, including off of trains. This is a real and growing problem. Major railroads have reported more than 75,000 theft incidents in 2025, totaling over $200 million in losses, and a jump of more than 50% from the year before. And this is really crazy because it is a growing problem. Just last week, I read a news story of at a rail yard, there was a shooting related to a theft incident. And, we've also heard reports that railroads have arrested the same person 17 times for repeated theft attempts, and another individual was taken by a railroad 5 times in one day trying to steal from the rail cars. And so CORCA is a response to that, right? It will enable prosecution of these organized retail supply chain groups using interstate or foreign commerce to facilitate crimes. It will also create a national coordination center within Homeland Security investigations so that agencies can actually share information across jurisdictions, and it will fund training and grants for state and local law enforcement. And so this bill was really, really important to the railroads, of course, and to our supply chain. And earlier this year, Rail Champions really stepped up. Alone, Rail Champions generated 550 actions into Congress, which basically means 550 um, letters into Congress in support of CORCA, which leading up to the House vote. And then on May 12th, it passed by a vote of 348 to 60, which is a true bipartisan result that didn't happen on its own. You know, Rail Champions really had their voices heard on this issue. And it got results, you know. And of course, this matters because now, because without CORCA, state and local police don't have great tools for addressing these organized theft rings that cross state lines. And so CORCA gives them what they're missing to address these issues: better coordination across agencies, more data sharing, and stronger legal tools that actually go after these networks. So it's a really big win for Rail Champions, and we really made our voices heard on this issue. But of course, this was only passed by the House. Now the Senate has their version that we're going to need Rail Champions again to have their voices heard on this issue. So be sure to keep an eye on your inbox for some CORCA action items that will be coming your way in the next, hopefully, few months. I'm going to go ahead and move on to our big picture legislative scenario, right? Where we're at. So surface transportation reauthorization. I'm going to give a quick background on what this is and why it matters to us as Rail Champions. So every 5 years or so, Congress has to renew the federal law that funds and sets policy for highways, transit, and passenger and freight rail. It's tied to the Highways Trust Fund, and without a new bill or an extension, these programs lose their funding authority, which means they can't take on any new projects or administer any new grants. So maybe you've heard of earlier versions of surface transportation legislation, like MAP 21 or the FAST Act. But most recently was the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act from 2021, which is also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. The current law expires on September 30th, 2026, which is why we're focused on delivering a bill that keeps freight rail networks safe, efficient, and robust. So what does that look like? What is it? What is a bill that shows that that keeps the freight rail network safe, efficient, and robust? It means data-driven regulations that allow railroads to innovate and improve safety without driving up costs. It means faster and more predictable permitting for infrastructure projects. It means restoring the Highway Trust Fund by making users pay their fair share, including heavier trucks. It also means strong investment in proven rail grants like the Rail Crossing Elimination Grant and the Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Grant, or the CRISI program. Those are our big items that we want to see in a surface transportation legislation. So where things stand on the timeline. Back in May, the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee advanced its version of the bill, the Build America 250 Act, or HR 8870. Unfortunately, this House bill included several amendments that would move freight rail policy backward. For example, it would require reinforcing older inspection methods and operating practices that have no proven way of improving safety. Instead of allowing railroads to continue adopting technologies that identify defects earlier, improve safety, and make the network more efficient. So that bill, the HR 8870 or the Build America 250 Act, now awaits a vote by the full House, but it hasn't been voted on, and now they're again in recess. So now in the other chamber, in the Senate, this past Saturday on August 8th, they voted 90-6 to pass a short-term extension of surface transportation programs. So this is basically a stopgap funding measure that keeps these programs running on autopilot while lawmakers finish negotiating the real long-term bill. So it pushes the current program's expiration from September 30th to December 11th, which buys time instead of forcing something under a deadline. This is not unusual, this type of extension. It is pretty common actually for surface transportation reauthorization. About a third of the time since 1997, they've had to pass an extension for this type of bill. So it's just something that happens. And if anything, it allows us some more time. So again, the timeline runs like this. The House advanced their bill HR 8870 in May. Just this past weekend, the Senate passed the stopgap on August 8th, and then December 11th is now the new deadline for a full package. So for Rail Champions, this matters because it means more time and more opportunity to influence what's in the final package, specifically to push to keep prescriptive mandates like crew size rules and manual inspections out of it. So because the bill isn't locked yet, and now we have time to put more input out, that means that a well-timed message from a rail champion can make a real difference. So keep an eye out for activations on this issue over the next several months. Hopefully there's not going to be another extension, but we never know. And so we're going to continue to push and make sure that rail champions are letting Congress know what matters to them and what they want to see in a surface transportation reauth. So now I'm going to go to the practical side of things. I'm going to do a quick Action Center demo where I log in, I show you what's available on the website, show you how to find a campaign, and show you how to send a message. For those of you who are in the chat, I would love to hear if you've been to our Action Center before. So let me know while I go through that. I'm going to stop sharing this and I'm going to go find the Action Center. Hold on one second. All right, can everyone see my screen? Okay. So this is our Action Center. If you go to railchampions.org, this is where you will go. If you have logged in before recently, it will automatically log you in. So up here, and there's the Join Us corner up here, it will say, hello, your name. For me, it would say, hello, Mary. So this is our main page. You scroll down, this is where you sign up. You enter your name, email, phone number, and that's how you join. Be sure if if it is your first time visiting the Action Center, to click this box. This will allow for us to send you text messages for really important action items. And that's going to be really important with this surface transportation reauthorization because timelines can move really quickly. And so we want to make sure that you have access to take action as soon as possible. It'll have all of our Rail Champions campaigns down here. It has our running counter of all of the people that we have involved as Rail Champions. A nice little quote from Dr. Staggers. But what I really wanted to show you all is this Rail 101 section here. This is a great way to get some talking points if you're not super confident as to why railroads matter. This is a good place to start to know, to get those facts that really make a difference when talking to your legislators, including stuff on spending, on the workforce, sustainability, things like that. I also wanted to point out our visual toolkit over here. You can download this toolkit that includes graphics and logos and different social media posts. It comes with like a signature photo that you can put in your email signature to get people to sign up to be Rail Champions to spread the message. So definitely check that out. And then it also has a little video about what Rail Champions is. I'm not going to play that today. I'm going to scroll back up to the top where you can find the campaigns. Up here on the top tab, you can click campaigns, and this will have all of our active campaigns. Right now we have, this is our Action Center campaign that is sending messages to the Senate about supporting a legislation that we want when it comes to the reauthorization, excuse me. There's an option to take action on social media, so you can post to your policymakers on why rail is essential. And then there's also, you can log your legislator relationships. So if you go to church with somebody who's on the T&I committee, these are the types of things that you can log in this area. But for this session, I'm going to go on into our Action Center for Surface Transportation Reauthorization. So this is what all of our campaigns will basically look like. This is the basic layout. Have the title, it'll give a count of how many actions have already been taken, which there's already been 332 actions, which means we've sent 3,232 actions, which means that's how many letters we've already sent into Congress on these issues, which is really exciting. It's a lot of actions, which is really great. So what you'll have to do if you're not already logged in is put your name, your email, and you'll have to put your full address so that they know that you're an actual constituent. I'm going to go ahead and put in my information. Again, it's important you can put your phone number so that you can get the text alerts. And then your address, of course. I'm going to put our office address. No, I'm going to put my address. And then I'm going to check the box so that I will be signed up for our text alerts. And then it will automatically fill in who your senators are. Of course, I live in North Carolina, so my senators are Ted Budd and Tom Tillis. And it will pre-fill this form letter, right? It has what we want to support measures that enhance safety by adopting contemporary regulatory strategies, replenish the Highway Trust Fund, provide funding. But what I really wanted to point out here is that you can click this edit button up here and add anything to this message. And something that's really important, again, like we've been discussing, is to put your story into it. So what I would do is, maybe after this first paragraph, I would add, my family has worked in the rails, has worked on the rails for years, and it really matters to my community to have access to these, to have access to rail for economic development, right? For economic development. If I had any like specific projects or specific ideas in mind, like say there's a crossing in your town that you need funding for a rail crossing elimination grant, right? You could put that there. Say we need this funding for this specific project in this town. That's the type of thing that will have your message stand out. And then you'll just click submit and it'll send your message to Congress. So it really is that simple. Once you go to railchampions.org to find a campaign and get your talking points and get things ready and get things sent off to Congress. This is also where like we'll have petition campaigns. I don't know if any of you all signed up for our locomotive emoji petition, but that's where this would be held. And so the different types of actions, right, will be writing a letter. We also might have you take action on social media, so do a post or share a link to something, or sign a petition, or write a letter, or make phone calls into Congress. That's also something that we'll have on the Action Center as well. So I'm going to stop sharing that now that I've walked through the Action Center and go back to my sorry. All right, are we back to the slides now? Okay. So, of course, there's more ways to take action outside of the Action Center, right? You can call your member of Congress. We do have some campaigns that will do that, like do it for you, but you can always just look up your members of Congress phone number in their office and give them a call, let them know that freight rail matters to you. You can always post on social media, download our visual toolkit and use one of those images as your post and be sure to tag us so then we can share it and share the message of Rail Champions. And again, use the Rail Champions signature image. I have it in my email signature, but anybody can. Anybody who's a Rail Champion can. So be sure to check that out if you haven't. This is going to be the #1 way that Rail Champions can have their voices heard in Congress. So I'm going to quickly go through some advocacy best practices. We have a blog on our website on gorail.org that dives into these best practices a little bit deeper. But I'm just going to roll through it. Of course, identify yourself. Let them know you're your constituent. That's the #1 thing they want to know. Are you somebody that may or may not vote for me? So we want to be sure to identify yourself, let them know that you're a constituent, and then, of course, make the ask, which just means say clearly what you want them to do and say it up front. Don't just say, I want to support general things. It needs to be a specific ask of do not vote for prescriptive rail mandates. Do vote for increased funding for rail grant programs, things like that. These clear upfront, and definitely don't bury it like 3 paragraphs in. So another best practice, of course, is to share your personal experience when you can. Like I said, stories beat statistics. And so telling them what freight rail means to you specifically is going to be more persuasive than any talking point. Those Rail 101 talking points are nice, but the thing that's going to really hit the legislator persuasively is going to be your story. But beyond that, if you do have local data or local stories in your district, that's going to make a big difference as well. Like the job, or if you have numbers like the jobs supported in your area. We do have these kinds of data on gorail.org on our state pages. We have state specific data, but if you have anything that's more local, that's going to really make a difference to legislators. Of course, #5 is to be concise. So short and clear stands out. You don't want to ramble on about a ton of things. You want to make sure that it's clear and it's concise. And of course, #6 is to find common ground and to respect the office, regardless of party or position, because it's obviously going to be far more persuasive as a constructive voice than an adversarial one. We don't want to go in saying, oh, you're not going to do what we want and we don't like you. Of course not. We want to come at it from we both want the same things. We want safe communities. We want opportunity for economic growth and development. And that's going to be more persuasive to a legislator than, of course, coming with your guns ablazing. So those are a few best practices. Again, we have more information on this on gorail.org. So if you want to learn more, you can check that out after this. So some next steps that you all can take today, things that I'm going to ask you to do right after you hang up from this call is to take our Rail Champions survey. So this survey will allow for us to tailor future action alerts and tailor our messaging to you all so that we know what matters most to you, right? If you are more interested in permitting reform versus or sustainability, things like that. We can take this survey and we can know more about you and we can make our program as beneficial to you as possible. Of course, follow us on social media. We are active on Facebook, LinkedIn, X, and Instagram. So follow us on all four of those pages. We are constantly posting information about freight rail. We're sharing news. We're explaining why freight rail matters. And so be sure to follow us and like and share those posts as well. Of course, watch out for future activations on surface transportation reauthorization and CORCA. Like I said, the next few months are going to be really critical for both of those bills. And so we're going to be asking you to activate on these issues in the coming months. So be sure to watch out for that and add me as a contact in your email so that none of those get lost or buried. And again, mark your calendars for key dates in 2027. Next year is the 200th anniversary of rail. 200 years of rail will be on February 28th. And so Rail Champions is going to be doing some really exciting things when it comes to the 200 years of rail. So mark your calendars for that. And then Railroad Day on May 19th. For those who don't know, Railroad Day is the big day where railroaders and rail industry folks and people from all across the country, advocates come and tell their story to legislators. They have meetings on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., and it's a whole day of a lot of fun, meeting a lot of people who care a lot about rail. And so you're always welcome to come if you're an active rail advocate and a active rail champion. Mark your calendars for that and come join us on Capitol Hill. So I'll just leave you with this, that advocacy is about sharing your experience, right? It's about sharing your story and not being a policy expert or not being a statistics expert. You don't need to know the detail of every federal transportation law. You just need to tell your story. So thank you all so much for being here today and for being Rail Champion. Before we sign off, does anybody have any questions for me? I don't know. I can't see the chat. There it is.
I don't see any questions. I just dumped a bunch of links in the chat about all the
Yes.
stuff Mary was talking about.
Yeah. Okay. Well, no questions.
Guess you covered it all.
I guess I covered it all. Well, that's great. Thank you all so much again for being here. My information is on this last slide. If you have any questions after this or want to get more involved or want to learn about how to get more involved with Rail Champions, please do not hesitate to reach out. I have my email and my phone there. So yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks,
Yeah.
Mary.
Thank you so much. Bye.